on A, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies to ensure that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. B, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies as it occurs and keeps Parliament informed of how the budget allocation is being implemented. And C, the administration of government agencies to determine hindrances to their efficiency and to make recommendations to the government for improvement of public administration. The purpose of this 12th public meeting of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee for this, the 11th Parliament, is to examine the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development's expenditure and internal controls in the following areas: inventory control, internal audit, accountability and transparency, goods and services, which would be subhead 02 in the budget, current transfers and subsidies, subhead 04 in the budget, the development program, the consolidated fund, and the infrastructure development program. The committee is desirous of hearing from the accounting officer and other key officials of the ministry to discover the challenges being faced and to determine possible solutions to these challenges. The role of this committee is to assist the ministries and departments in achieving efficient delivery of services whilst ensuring that expenditure is embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. This meeting has been held in public and is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11, Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's inquiry via email to parl101@ttparliament.org, facebook.com/ttparliament, or Twitter @ttparliament. Again, I would want to say a very special welcome to the officials present here today. And can I now ask the officials of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. I thank you for your invitation. My name is Marion Hayes. I'm Acting Permanent Secretary at the Ministry, and I will ask the other members to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, Chair and all members. I am Danraji Mutu, Acting Director, Human Resource Management. Thank you.
Good afternoon to the Chair and members of the committee. My name is Solomon Lam, the accountant at East Port of Spain Development Company Limited.
Good afternoon, Chair and other members of the committee. My name is Lydia Brown, and I'm the Secretary Executive Officer of the Sugar Industry Labour Welfare Committee.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Brent Lyons. I'm the Managing Director of the Trans-Tobago Housing Development Corporation.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Inskip Pauline. I'm the Divisional Manager of Finance, acting at the Housing Development Corporation.
Good afternoon, all. I'm Romel Ramarak, Divisional Manager of Construction Management and Operations at the HDC.
Thank you. Welcome. I'm sorry. Okay.
Good afternoon, Chair. I am Mrs. Gomati Rajkumar Singh Maharaj, Acting Auditor 2. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. I am Nina Antwine, Senior Economist of the Economic Research and Planning Unit within the Ministry.
Thank you. I apologize. I didn't mean to exclude you at all. I will now invite members of the committee to introduce themselves, starting from my extreme right.
Pleasant good afternoon. Allyson Baksh, member.
Good afternoon. Nicole Olivierre, member.
Welcome again, Wademark, member.
Good afternoon. Ayana Webster Roy, member.
I am Lackram Bodoe, Vice Chairman of the committee, acting in the capacity of Chairman this evening. Again, I want to say a very special welcome, and perhaps at this point, I can invite you, Madam Permanent Secretary, to make a brief opening statement.
I just want to thank you again for the invitation that has been extended to the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and its agencies to appear before this committee. The Ministry of Housing and Urban Development has been going through a lot of restructuring since 2013. And the last set that we had, I think we had twice in 2015, and it has resulted in a lot of expansion and contraction of the ministry. Right now, the ministry is still in the process of regularizing and reviewing its structure to ensure that we have the right staff amount with the competencies to achieve its mandate. The Ministry of Housing and Urban Development has 3 categories of agencies under its purview. We have wholly owned enterprises, for example, UDCOT, which are UDCOT and East Port of Spain Development Company. We do have a minority-owned enterprise, which is Trinidad and Tobago Mortgage Finance Company. And then under statutory boards and other bodies, we do have Trinidad and Tobago Housing Development Corporation, the Land Settlement Agency, Sugar Industry Labor Welfare Committee, New City Mall, and Eastside Plaza. I know that the committee is like a watchdog for the government, and I have noted the focus of the committee, which is accountability, transparency, and good governance. And I have also noted that the committee is there to assist ministries in terms of and making recommendations where shortcomings are identified. So we at the ministry stand here willing to work with you all to make sure that the ministry does what it has to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam PS, for that opening statement. Before the committee goes into the finer details of the expenditure that would have been incurred during the current financial year, I would just want to ask, just for the edification of the members and for the benefit of the public at large, if you can tell us the following. And I'm just trying to get the broad picture here with regards to the role of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. And the particular questions I'll be looking for the answers to would be, has any survey or study been done to determine the actual housing needs of the population of Trinidad and Tobago? The second, does the ministry have any idea of the current housing stock in Trinidad and Tobago? And the third part of that question would be, does the government have in place a housing policy, and I put that in inverted commas, to treat with the needs of those citizens requiring housing in Trinidad and Tobago? Can I invite you to respond, Madam PS?
In terms of the study with respect to the needs of the housing, we have not done any study within recent times, but I know that we have one coming up that we are supposed to be doing a study which would lead into the policy, right? So right now we don't, at this time, there's not any particular study that would have been done to indicate the needs of the housing. In terms of we do have a housing policy now, but I'm saying that is under review, so that the needs that we spoke about just now, that you asked about just now, that is going to be feeding into the new housing policy that we're going to be having. But nothing has been done on that as yet. In terms of the current stock, I think I want to ask Mr. Brent Lyons to give information on that in terms of the current stock of the
stock was the stock in the country, not HGC stock. Housing stock in the country. That was the question.
In terms of the question with respect to the idea of the current stock of you are asking about the stock of the country?
Yes, of the country, so that we get we have a broad picture.
No, we don't.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask 2 further questions before I open up to the other members of the committee. And these really would pertain to the submissions of financial reports. And the first question would be, is the ministry up to date on its submissions of audited financial statements and administrative reports to Parliament? And the second question would be, are the agencies / state enterprises under the purview of the ministry up to date on its submissions of audited financial statements and administrative reports to the Parliament?
In terms of the the admin reports for the ministry, we have submitted 2000 and I think up to 2015. So we are working on the 16 now, 14, 15, and we are working on 15, 16 now, right? That is being worked on now. In terms of the statements from the agencies with respect to their financial reports, financial statements, that's the question here asked. We are working on getting all together. We have some of the agencies are outstanding, and we are working on getting all of them together. For example, TTMF is up to date. Eastside Plaza, New City Mall, East Port of Spain, they are up to date. So we are waiting on a few to submit.
Can you indicate to us, Madam PS, whether any time frame has been issued to these agencies as to when these reports can be expected?
Yes, we did issue a time frame, and we are working on collecting before the end of the fiscal they have to submit.
Thank you, Madam PS. I just want to get the big picture and to ask you, in terms of, an estimated ballpark figure of the total amount of your, I think it's just over 1 billion that would have been allocated to the ministry in this current financial year. And can you indicate, perhaps what percentage overall of that allocation has been spent? I'm just trying to get an idea as to the constraints or the efficiencies that might be involved in incurring expenditure.
In terms of the overall allocation, you're saying, I can't give you that figure now, in terms of what it is has been spent so far.
Sure. Is that something that you'd be willing to submit to us in the committee?
Yes, in terms of the overall figure for the ministry.
And before I leave the big picture, Madam PS, I just want to raise one of the issue, and it pertains to a newspaper report which would have been last Thursday, and the heading would have been Ease Ahead for HTC, and it speaks to a memorandum of agreement between a Canadian-based company and a local firm with regards to the provision of 100,000 houses, and saying that this will in some way help the HTC in terms of their applicant waiting list. And to ask you, Madam PS, what your view would be in light of this development, this memorandum of agreement. And secondly, to ask, has the ministry or UDCOT embarked on, or has plans to embark on any public-private partnership arrangements for home construction to fulfill the housing needs of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago?
In terms of the newspaper report, I cannot say that there's any input from the Ministry of Housing in terms of that memorandum. However, in my view is that if something like that is done, how will it impact on the mandate of the HEC and the ministry in general? So, as I said, I can't say that I have any information on the memorandum, but I'm just saying that going forward, if that happens, it will impact on the mandate of the HEC and, as I said, the ministry in general.
Thank you, Madam PS. The second part of the question would have been speaking towards the public-private partnerships.
With private partnerships with going forward, you said?
Yes.
I am not aware that there's anything like that happening now, any public-private partnerships with UDCOT.
I'm sorry. Perhaps I can invite through you, Madam PS, the Managing Director of the HCC to shed some light on this.
On the problem, yeah.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. The HCC has...
Congratulate you on your new appointment and wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that very much. Mr. Chairman, as you may be aware or recall, the HCC in 2016, early 2016, would have advertised for expressions of interest to partner with the HCC with respect to public-private partnership arrangements. The response to that was very encouraging. We are now at the stage where we are soon to be embarking upon invitations for requests for proposals from respondents to the EOI. We anticipate that those responding to that will be quite significant. It will provide us with much needed funding to be able to deliver on our mandate to produce low and middle income housing.
Thank you very much, Managing Director. At this point, I would just want to open up the floor and perhaps move on to the area of inventory control. And may I invite Member Baksh to take the lead with this heading.
Thank you, Vice Chair. My question relates to the acquisition of materials and motor vehicles. All right, in your submission, you've indicated that the ministry is working on electronic system for monitoring items. All right, can you tell me what is the status?
The system has been implemented, or no, not implemented as yet. What is happening is that the system has been, the IT have created the system, and right now we're in the process of inputting data into the system. And this week we were supposed to launch the system where all the requests for inventory, for whatever it is, would be going through the system. Anything, stocks, inventory, assets, everything would be going through the system. So that launch was supposed to take place this week.
Are all items recorded in the inventory register? If not, which items are excluded?
All items are recorded in the inventory register. Yes.
When was the last check conducted on both the inventory register and the vehicle register? And also, are you satisfied with the frequency of the checks?
Well, we have checks from both internal and external audit, right? So in terms of the last check which was done on from the auditor or external audit, that would have been done this year, right, early up this year. In terms of the external audit, I cannot say exactly when it was done, but I know they do frequent, like quarterly checks on those registers.
Is the internal audit department sufficiently staffed?
Not at this point in time. Right now we have one auditor, one and two auditing assistants. And going forward, if we have to do audit on the agencies under our purview, that amount of staff would not be sufficient. So we are in the process of restructuring. As I mentioned in the opening, we had said that we are currently reviewing our structure to be able to deliver on our mandate, and internal audit is one of the areas that we'll be looking at. We have been looking at.
My other question is, does the inventory register and the vehicle register kept by the ministry also record the inventory and vehicles from other agencies and departments falling under the purview of the ministry?
No, the inventory register, the ministry just has the vehicles for the ministry.
Okay, but how does the ministry account for the inventory and vehicles kept by the agencies and other agencies and departments?
At this point in time, it is not accounted for, but as I said, going forward, we'll be looking to see how we could capture all that information for the records of the ministry.
Okay. My other question deals with the maintenance of the inventory register. What measures have been implemented to prevent the movement of items between locations without documentation?
Without documentation. What is happening is that in the administrative section, they are responsible for the inventory and the management of all of that. So what we have put in place, what we are going to be putting in place is where we have all the inventory in a particular area accounted for in the room, whatever, if it's a room, right? So basically what is supposed to happen is that no one is supposed to move the item from there without permission. If that happens, because they do regular checks, they will pick it up and then be able to return the item to where it is supposed to be.
Right. My other question is, what is the expected time frame for the completion of the move over to the electronic inventory, which is aimed at making monitoring easier?
Okay. Well, I did say that we're supposed to launch it. So once we launch it this week, I think, I would say probably within a 2-3 month period, we should go fully over, because it will take some time for persons to get accustomed to the system and kind of get fully off the manual and go over into the computerized system. So I would say probably within a 2-3 month period.
My last question to you deals with training. Personnel responsible for maintenance of the inventory register. Have they completed training, and how many persons were trained? Also, what was the nature of the training undertaken? Who was the service provider? Was it external? Was it in-house? And also, how was the trainer selected?
Okay. No formal training has been done for persons there. What we do is that if there's any training at all in inventory management through the Public Service Academy, we would access it there, right? But no formal training has been done for the year within that particular area.
Do you have any plans?
Well, going forward, I think once we get funding, the amount of funding that because we have plans to do the training, but if we don't get the funds, then we have to kind of choose which is the more critical area. And then so the inventory training kind of falls down, right? So.
Thank you.
Member Webster Roy.
Thank you. Madam Pierce, in your response to Senator Baksh, you noted that you have the listing on the walls in the various rooms to verify the items in the room.
In the rooms.
But who guarantees the accuracy of the list? For example, I could go in, move an item, take the list down, restructure it and stick it back up. Was the cross-checking process to ensure the list would be valid?
Well, we do have a book that has all the items in here. So that is the cross-check. So when you would look at that book, and then you would see like room number 1, and you would know what is supposed to be in room number 1 or room number 2. So that is the cross-check there, right? But in terms of, as I said, we try to encourage persons that this is not the right thing to do, but if it happens, then we, as I said, constant monitoring and constant checking, and we realize that is happening, then we just kind of try to fix it then. Because the items are also tagged, right? So that could also help in terms of,
the tagging, is it backed up electronically?
Yes.
You have the information?
Yes.
And who are the officers responsible for maintaining that electronic register, and who is the officer responsible for managing that particular book?
Well, we do have an administrative officer who is in charge of that. We have 2 administrative officers, actually. One is in charge of facilities and one is in charge of the stores and the assets. So they work together. And then we have IT assisting them in terms of that electronic part of it. You're very welcome.
Madam PS, if I could just ask one further question with regards to inventory control. and your submission with the aspect of omission of entries to the register, and which indicated that registers were not being kept prior to fiscal 2016.
Yes.
Can you perhaps explain why that was so? And can you further explain how items would have been accounted for prior to fiscal 2016?
Okay. Before the ministry had been going through a lot of restructuring, as I'd mentioned. So it was expanding and reducing and expanding and reducing. So it was a challenge, really, to keep track of the divisions that would have made the persons who would have gone, right? So when we realized what was happening, as I said, because it wasn't, that inventory wasn't taking place, and we realized the seriousness of it, we decided to put those in place. To admit, I can't say how things were being tracked at that point in time. But I'm saying once we realized there was a shortcoming, we put things in place to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Do you feel that the ministry and by extension the people of the country would have been disadvantaged by that situation?
Not very much. Not very much, because the ministry is really small, right? So not very much.
Member Olivierre.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to delve a little further into the issue of internal audit. So in an earlier response, you indicated that at the ministry you have 4 members of your internal audit unit. I'd like to get an indication, do the agencies under the ministry have their own internal audit units, or does the ministry's unit provide internal audit functions for all its agencies?
The agencies have their own internal audits.
Every
right?
one of them?
Yes. Yes? Yes. Yes.
Okay. That is very good. Now, pertaining to the strength of the audit unit at the ministry itself, your highest level is an auditor 2.
Yes.
May I ask what level of qualifications in performing audits does that position require, and what's the level of experience in performing audits of the incumbent in that position?
The auditor 2 is a public service position, and the public service, they go based on seniority. They do promotions based on seniority. So the person in that position would probably have, well, not probably, would have 5 O-levels, which is what you would come into the service with, and there's no special training or experience or anything for that person to go up to auditor 2 position. Hence the reason we have been looking to, the ministry has been looking to, well, not create, but go through the PMCD for a position of auditor 3. That position would be someone with ACCA, would be more experienced, so then we would be able then to look more closely at our agencies in terms of the audit function.
Well, if I may just ask, so the current incumbent in that position, in the position at the Ministry of Housing, has that person been exposed to any training then in auditing?
Not really. This person is that person in the back there. She's fairly new. She's an auditor 1, substantively acting 2. So she just came into the ministry about 2-3 months ago, right? So in terms of formal training and auditing, that is not, yeah. But we are going to be looking at it going forward, given we have recognized the need for a different kind of auditing. So we will be looking at that, putting into our training plan going forward for the new fiscal.
Okay, in terms of, the work program, so is it that you did not have someone performing the function previously prior to her arrival, or was the function previously performed?
No, there was someone there, but as I said, with the public service, seniority takes precedence. So once that person is senior, then whoever is there was acting has to revert, and this person will just take over.
Okay, if I may just ask, does the ministry have an internal audit charter and has a work program for the auditing function for the year been developed?
We do have a charter, and we do have a work program for the year. That person reports directly to the permanent secretary, and we do have a work program set out for the year in terms of what is required to be done.
So the one for 2017 has been finalized and it's being implemented as we speak?
I must.
She may respond directly if she wishes.
Yeah. I know that we do a work program, but I have to check on it to see if it's really been. We do a work program every year. I know the audit does one, right? But I will have to check to see if it's been implemented as we speak. Because we had changes. As I said, we had changes in the unit.
Okay. From the work done in the past, are there any specific areas under the ministry that are persistently not looked at by internal audit?
Looking back at the audit, as I said, historically, audit has been working basically with figures, right? So they check to make sure that your figures are up to date, are correct kind of thing, right? So you look at your pay sheets, you look at your vote book, you look at your request for releases, those kind of things, right? So historically, that is what audit does. But I cannot say that there's one area or some areas that they have not been looking at, right? But going forward, we want them to be thinking differently.
Does the ministry practice risk management? Do you have a risk register?
No. That is one of the areas we want to look at going forward.
Are you compliant with the OSH Act?
Yes. Yes. We are renting a building, so yeah.
Well, just for information, compliance with the OSH Act is not simply the physical structure alone, but there are some management systems that need to be put in place administratively.
We do have a committee, and
you
yes.
have the committee. Excellent.
Yes, we do have a committee, and they meet regularly, and they do reports, and if anything is wrong, they will let us know. That happens.
So you have an OSH risk register, and do you conduct, awareness training for all members of staff so they understand their responsibility under the OSH Act
yes.
and the responsibility of the employer as well?
Yes, yes.
That's very good. So you have an OSH risk register as well?
I'm not sure about the OSH risk register, but I know we do training on with the members of staff.
Okay, thank you. In terms of managing the ministry, do you have a strategic plan?
Not at this point in time, but we're in the process of employing a consultant to do the plan.
Okay. I'd like to find out from some of your other major agencies on the strength of their internal audit units.
Yes.
So we'll start with the HDC.
Yes.
Remember, we do have an internal audit unit at the HGC, staffed with professional accountants and folks with experience, significant years experience in auditing. We do have an audit charter and a work plan that is being implemented at the moment.
What about risk management?
We don't have a risk register. Recently, the board approved both a strategic plan and a revised organizational structure. And in that structure, a component of risk has been put in there. There's a position of risk manager, which was advertised in the newspaper some time ago. And within the next month or so, we will have a risk manager on board.
In the absence of a specified person holding the title of risk management, does the audit committee then of the board of HDC look at risk management as a factor in achieving its strategic objectives?
Yes, they do.
And who has responsibility for identifying and managing the risk?
It's a combination between the divisional manager, finance, and of course the managing director.
Good answer. Can I inquire from the other agencies about the strength of your internal audit departments and its role?
Sugar Welfare is an extremely small agency, and we have one auditor one, and as the permanent secretary said before, the person is not a trained auditor, does not have any, the technical expertise to be an auditor, and concentrates mostly on checking cash, vote books, etc. I did advise the auditor, there's a course, the government runs a course for auditors, for people who are auditors in the government service, and it is run by the UE School of Continuing Studies. And I did encourage the auditor to participate in that course. Unfortunately, I don't think they got enough persons. So if they didn't get enough persons, they wouldn't run the course.
That certainly is unfortunate, particularly since at the ministry, no training has been provided. So perhaps it was a lack of widespread advertising of that program. That could be response. Do we have the LSA present? Yes, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. At the moment, we don't have an internal audit function, okay? Historically, we had one where the internal audit charter manual was developed. So those documents form part of our policy right now. However, due to a lack of funding, we couldn't have afforded an internal auditor. In the last financial year, we sent out a tender because we thought it would have been better to outsource the function. And we had some bids. The selection process was completed, and I think PwC was selected. But because of the funding issue, we had to just put it on hold a while. Once the funds are released to us, that we can afford to pay for the program, the auditor will be installed.
If you're engaged in PwC, that would be as an external auditor, not for internal auditing?
No, for internal auditing services, yes. Not as an external auditor. Now, what happens is that some of the accounting firms, apart from doing external auditing, they also have an internal audit program where they would come into the organization, they would do the risk assessment, okay? And they would do the risk assessment, they would develop a charter, they would develop a manual, and that would be one cost. But as a going concern, they would send staff on a periodic basis to perform the internal audits and then report to the board of directors and the managing director. So it's like they provide a caretaker service. So that is actually something that is provided by a lot of the accounting firms right now.
If I may suggest that perhaps the Ministry of Housing should have taken the responsibility for providing internal audit services to you, since you are an agency under their purview.
Ideally, yes, but only recently we've been placed under the Ministry of Housing. I think only in September 2016. Prior to that, we were under different ministries, Ministry of Local Government, Ministry of Planning, back to local government, back to planning. We were juggling around for a little while since the company has been incorporated.
But under those previous incarnations, would the internal audit of the line ministry then have performed those services
No,
for you?
no.
So you,
in the previous incarnations, no. The internal audit function was not performed by the line ministry.
it was performed by you?
It was performed by the company. They had an internal auditor on staff.
Okay.
And the reports would have been formed or would have formed a part of the board meetings, and that would have been forwarded to the line ministry.
Okay, excellent. Any other agencies? No, that's it. So, Permanent Secretary, are you satisfied then with the internal auditing function being conducted in the agencies under your purview?
I would have to say that I could only answer that question if we are doing the audit then, right? So as far as I'm concerned, they are auditing, but I could only say their audit is good for them. Now, some of the companies, some of the agencies, based on their board minutes, right? We look at the board minutes, right? And based on some, like for example, TTMF has an audit committee, and in their board minutes, they would submit what the committee would do. So that's what we would look at, right? So if we are looking at it like that, then of course we could say that yes. But I believe that going forward, I think that the ministry needs to be more involved in that. And that is why we said we wanted someone with more skills or training, expertise to do that kind of thing. And it might not be that you will be looking at everything, but certainly you will probably do like ad hoc kind of auditing on them, on the agencies, which would make the ministry more comfortable.
So you indicated you're currently undergoing a restructuring exercise. At what stage in the process have you reached?
Right now, we are reviewing some of our programs. We do have 2 programs under us now, and that is going to be reviewed by the PMCD. They're going to be doing that. And in our different units, like legal is being restructured now. That note is done with the PMCD. The communications unit is also being restructured. But beside that, we are also looking at our strategic plan. So I think, it is now going to be taking place. So that would probably put us in a better place to be able to deal with our restructured ministry once the plan, because the plan will kind of focus us better.
So when do you think you would finalize the structure that you will be seeking approval for?
Well, we are working towards the strategic plan is going to be most likely, now is what, April, probably May, June, July, probably about 3 months. So hopefully by that time we'd have the structure in place. Now, remember, we also depend on the PMCD to help us with the positions and that kind of thing. So even if we have the structure in terms of the filling, and so we have to depend on the PMCD, and also if we have to create positions, then we also depend on them. Right? So I would say probably about 3 months, right? We could have that.
So by July, you would be ready to seek cabinet approval?
With our year going forward, most likely, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam PS. I want to recognize Member Mark, followed by Member Coffey.
Yes.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and let me welcome the team again.
Thank you.
You know, I think it's in the Bible. Proverbs, it says that where there is no vision, the people perish. I am alarmed that after 20 months, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development does not have a strategic plan. Madam PS, may I ask, how long have you been acting?
February 2017.
Where is the substantive permanent secretary? Is she on vacation leave?
She's on vacation at this time.
Listen, the chairman had asked early on whether you could provide us with some appreciation of the housing needs of the population. And the mandate of the HCC is to house the population in many respects, one of its mandates. And you told the chairman that information is not available. Is it not available to supply us with it now, or would you be in a position to supply us with the information later on in writing?
I will be able to supply it later on in writing.
In writing?
Yes.
And what about the housing stock of the HDC? What is the housing stock like at this time? Would Mr. Brent be able to tell us?
Yes.
Okay. Member, and just maybe for clarification, the original question was housing stock in the country. But as it pertains to housing stock at the HDC has over 40,000 units that it has produced. In terms of current stock available for distribution and under construction and so on, that's a different question. Under construction, we have 5,000. Okay. Under construction, we have 5,600 units. And available for distribution, we'd have less than 1,000 units.
Okay. Now, the information I have before me does not square with what we have been advised. Before me, is the following. There is no auditing unit at the East Side Plaza. There is no auditing unit at the New City Mall. Now, if I understand further that no internal audits have been conducted at these places because of location and security concerns. The question I'd like to ask, how long, first of all, are there internal audit units? Because we have been given different information. So could you verify once again whether there are internal audit units? And secondly, if there are, we have been advised that no internal audits have been conducted at the City Hall, New City Mall and East Side Plaza due to their location and security concerns. Is that a fact? And if that is a fact, how long we have not had any internal audits of these very important entities and agencies falling under the purview of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development? Madam PS?
New City Mall and East Side Plaza. I'll have to check to see when was the last audit done, because I know that the internal audit, our internal audit units, they normally do audits in those two specific areas. So I really have to check to let you know when was the last time audits were done there.
My colleague rather asked about OSH compliance, and you said you were, and whether you had your training being pursued in that regard. Would you be able to provide us in writing with this information, confirming that you are OSH compliant? And your inventory or inventory system, does it exist in each agency, or would you say that it only exists in a partial way at the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development?
The inventory system at the ministry is for the ministry. We don't have any inventory system for the agencies, right? They would have their own inventory system. So what we have is really just for the ministry, the general admin.
So could you state for a fact that in all the agencies, the City Mall, the East Side, East Port of Spain Company, you also have New City Mall, East Side Plaza, those agencies do have an inventory or inventory system that you are aware of as the accounting officer? Could you verify that? Could you authenticate? Could you confirm?
I will have to check for New City Mall and East Side Plaza, but I believe the other agencies would have their inventory management.
Now, you know the accounting officer of any agency or government ministry, in your instance, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, has an overall responsibility under the Exchequer and Audit Act for ensuring that your agencies that fall under your purview are compliant with financial regulations as well as the Exchequer and Audit Act. So you should be in a position today to tell us as a committee whether these units exist or not, because you are the accounting officer. Would you not agree?
Yes,
So you will be able to put that in writing for us
I will.
and let us know what is taking place in that regard. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll come back again.
Thank you. Before I move on to Member Coffey, just to include in that request from Member Mark, the status with regards to audit of the Land Settlement Agency as well. I take it that there's no representative of the LSA here.
No, the LSA wasn't invited to this
Okay.
meeting.
Member Coffey. Nevertheless, can we have that
The status
as part of the written submission?
yeah, what do you want the status of?
The audited reports.
Audited report. I think that they have another a meeting was supposed to be held on the 26th with LSA, and they had rescheduled it.
Okay.
Right, so.
Member Coffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam PS, or the Managing Director of the HDC, I am seeing in your submission under acquisition of materials and motor vehicles that you keep an inventory register of motor vehicles and that you value for money is determined by checking and comparing quality and prices between suppliers and durability of items. Now, I think I read some time ago in a newspaper article that the AGC leased Mercedes-Benz's Range Rovers. Now, was this done in terms of checking with other government agencies? The policy that led to that, if the reports were accurate, was that done? Because I don't know of any other government agency that leases those kinds of vehicles.
I can't say if there's any policy like that in terms of leasing vehicles. I can't say. I don't know of a policy like that.
So does that mean that there were no vehicles leased, or?
The question was the agency checking other government agencies. We don't know.
Excuse me? What was the question again?
Does that mean that there were no vehicles leased, or just that you don't know?
I would let Mr. Lyons answer that question.
Member Coffey, I can answer that. Vehicles matching the description that you just described there were in fact leased at one point in time by the HGC. Those vehicles are no longer being leased by the HGC.
Okay. I'm trying to get to the policy because someone else could come and decide to lease those vehicles or those types of vehicles. So is there a policy as to what vehicles can be leased, one, and how do you determine whether to lease or purchase?
I can confirm there is now a policy with respect to the types of vehicles that can be leased. It specifies in terms of engine size and so on.
You answered because I was trying to find out whether someone can do it now. Okay. The other part of my question on the same area, there is a cabinet minute to the effect that vehicles utilized by state corporations and ministries are supposed to be tagged with the name of the agency. In terms of all the vehicles that you have in your inventory, have you ensured that all the vehicles are stamped with either HGC or the Ministry of Housing?
Okay, the vehicles belonging to the Ministry of Housing, they are stamped with the Ministry of Housing. Those belonging to HEC
are yet to be stamped, and they will be. We are in the process of changing the fleet. when we get a new fleet, the vehicles will be stamped.
Okay, thank you.
Madam PS, if I can move along to the submission under accountability and transparency, and to note that there is an absence of a monitoring and evaluating unit in the ministry. Could you perhaps give us the reasons why that is so? And if I may ask a second question, in terms, because I note that the Economic Policy and Research Unit has been given the responsibility of doing the monitoring and evaluation, and you know, what effect that has had, the additional work in terms of the workload of the Economic Policy and Research Unit.
The Monitoring and Evaluation Unit, I know at one point in time Cabinet had agreed that each ministry should have a Monitoring and Evaluation Unit. I cannot say why the Ministry of Housing didn't have one. However, recognizing that shortcoming, the ministry is now in the process of creating a project unit, right? Because, as you said, the Economic Research Unit has that responsibility now in terms of monitoring the projects, going on site visits and whatever, which is in addition to their regular work. And because of that, we don't do as many site visits as we should. So it really impacts on that aspect of the job. So we are in the process now of creating a project unit, and we are hoping that we will have the monitoring and evaluation function reside in that unit. So they will be managing the projects, going on the site visits, monitoring the progress of the projects, and reporting on that.
Can you give some ideas to when you think this project unit might be?
Well, the draft
reality?
note has been prepared, and we have to send it to PMCD now. I know the PMCD has an issue with creating contract positions, so we were kind of reviewing it to see whether we could get establishment positions in the project unit going forward. So the note is prepared, it just has to go to them now for their comments.
If I can perhaps ask the Managing Director, HTC, what is the process for following up on projects by the HTC?
Okay, at the HTC, we have a very rigid project management program in place. And as a matter of fact, it starts with our project development approach. We have established a project development team or committee with all the relevant persons as members on the team. So for instance, we have Mr. Ramarag as Divisional Manager Construction Management. We have a Divisional Manager Project Development and Oversight. We have quantity surveyors. We have a lawyer on the team. We have wastewater engineers and so on. These folks go through all the elements of project development to ensure that we have all the right aspects in place for the projects, everything that we have to have, all the approvals and so on. When it moves from the project development stage and it goes to implementation, this is when Mr. Ramrak, as Divisional Manager, Construction Management and Operation, takes over. And Mr. Ramrak and his team, they have a very rigid program. As a matter of fact, they have introduced what we call a 22-point certification program. And what that program says is that for every stage of the construction program, you have to have approval to move from one stage to the next. So for instance, if you have to set out a building, the building is set out or the house is set out, you actually have to have that certified that it was set out correctly before you can go on to any kind of excavation. If you put the foundation down, that has to be approved. And that approval is actually a certificate that is signed both by the HDC representative and the contractor's representative. You have to have that certificate present before you can be paid. So that's the extent to which we go. And that process goes from, like I say, setting out to completion.
Thank you. In that submission, I also noted that you had a challenge with revenue collection. Can you perhaps give us an update as to how you plan to increase your revenue collection?
Chair, I'll defer to Mr. Polliner.
Good afternoon, members and Chair. We have had a challenge with revenue collection just from the very issue of our submissions. We submitted to the Ministry of Housing a certain sum of money, and we submitted 900,000. We got 900 million, we got 354 million out of the 900 million. We submitted a 3 billion figure for the last period, and we got 160 million out of 3 billion in terms of the IDF. In terms of the PSIP, Public Sector Investment Program, we got 15 million. So our expenditure was cut significantly in terms of how we get revenue, Mr. Chair.
I'm not sure if that is the answer to the question. I was directed more in terms of the revenue collection for mortgages.
We're now going into the other
okay.
forms of,
Sure.
of revenue, because that is a form of revenue also, Mr. Chair. We get revenue from converting our rental portfolio into mortgages. TTMF does most of our mortgages. The HGC no longer do mortgages. It used to up until 2008, I think, was our last mortgage done. So TTMF converts our rentals into mortgages. That's one way we get rentals. We get rentals through our license to occupy and our rent to own systems, and we have people on license to occupy. In terms of units, we have units with people with rent to own in terms of revenue collections. So, and we have rentals. So that is how we get most of our revenue right now. Yeah.
Before I recognize Member Olivierre, can you shed some light on this mortgage conversion caravan drive as you stated in the submission? What exactly does that mean?
Chair, what has transpired in the past, there are several developments that HGC would have built on state lands, and those lands were not vested in the HGC. Over the period of the last, I would say, about 4 or 5 years, the process has been to have those lands properly vested in the HGC so that the homeowners can, in fact, get title to the properties. And what they were given were license to occupy. So the mortgage caravan that we have ongoing now, it is an avenue where homeowners can convert these licenses into actual mortgages, so you have title to your property, and there are several benefits to that, as you could well imagine. It is at that conversion, when that conversion takes place, HGC collects the value of the mortgage. That's how we generate some revenue. The caravan is intended to encourage all those folks who can now qualify, who can now convert from licenses into mortgages. It is to their advantage, and of course, we collect the revenue.
What sort of public education measures have taken place with regards to this?
Good. So we have published advertisements in the newspapers. We have advertisements online. We have done a few radio ads. We are developing a larger marketing campaign where that will be rolled out soon, so folks can see the entire picture and program.
Member Olivierre.
Thank you. Let me congratulate the HDC on their efforts at convert and giving these new homeowners the opportunity to convert a mortgage. I know lots of persons really are stressed with the rental arrangement. Now, given that mortgage collection is one of your main streams of revenue, how do you reconcile that with the fact that 79% of your mortgage portfolio are currently in arrears? So what are you doing about actually collecting that revenue from the mortgages?
Yes, you're correct. Upon review and I need to put it in context. A large portion of that would be rental folks that are in arrears. But you're correct, it is 79%, and the 79% is an unacceptable level. We have implemented several programs within the agency where we are reaching out to customers. We write them, we call them, we curse them, encourage them to bring their accounts up to date. We also invite them to come in and establish payment plans with us because some folks may not be able to liquidate the debt in one. So we encourage them to establish payment plans and so on. And we do go out, we do invite folks in to come in. We have, as if you can call, I don't want to call it a last resort, we do have collection agencies also that we're working with who will get to those customers that might be posing to be difficult for us.
Member Mark.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on a question that has been raised to Mr. Brent, Managing Director. Could you tell us what is the total arrears, the 79% that my colleague referred to? When you convert that into dollars and cents, what would that amount to?
Member Mark, that figure is $106,792,397.67 as that I am advised. 13th of April.
13th of April.
13th.
Yeah. How many customers are involved?
3,155 customers.
And you mentioned something called a collection agency.
Yes.
Can you share with this committee what has been the success rate of this agency in getting delinquent tenants to meet their financial obligations to the HDC?
Okay. Member Mark, unfortunately, I don't have that number here. I can certainly provide it for you.
Yes, I'll appreciate that. I'll appreciate that very much. What period of time, as we are on this whole question of arrears, what period of time must elapse before you issue letters of notice to, let's say, tenants who are in default? What time frame you would give them before you alert them to the action that you intend to take if they do not meet their obligations?
7 days, Member Mark.
7 days?
7 days.
Is that a new policy?
Not that I am aware. I've been at the agency for just about 5 years now, and as far as I know, that is what has been in place. What you may want to ask would be, what is the response of folks when those letters are generated?
Well, maybe you can help us, Engage Chair.
It's not entirely encouraging, which is why we have to really work hard at trying to reach out to our tenants and so on, our delinquent tenants, and try to encourage them to come in and make good on your account. I mean, the agency is not in the business of wanting to put people out of homes and so on. Unfortunately, it could get to that at times. But our objective really is to try to assist and help you get back on track. You know, there might also be a perception in the public domain that an agency house is free or almost free, so that I got an agency house and I don't have to pay. But that is certainly not the case, and you know, so we would always want to encourage our tenants to make good on your payments. We encourage them to do that, and we will encourage them to help themselves. Like I say, we offer payment plans. You can come in and talk to us. Don't be afraid.
Could you share with us what would have been your revenue collection in 2016, 2015, and what you have projected for 2017, given the over $100 million you mentioned outstanding in arrears? What would be your projections for 2017 and what you actually collected in the last 2 to 3 years?
Okay. Member Mark, let me ask Mr. Pollard.
Member Mark, for the last 8 months, we collected from DRSL, which is one of the debt collection agencies, $2.4 million. And from AV Knowles, we collected $3,338,000 for the last 5 months, AV Knowles. So you find that this is the actual issue.
Yeah. But you know, in forecasting, given the fact that you are dependent on the state for your revenue stream to build, what would have been your projection for 2017? You have collected 5 million or thereabout all told, but what would the agency be projecting in order to reduce this array, the arrears that you have there, I think 106 million or thereabout. So I just wanted to know what was your projection and whether you are in line given the target that you have set. So far you have collected about 6 million or thereabouts, which is healthy. What is your projection for 2017?
Senator Ma, we are in the process right now we have called in the 2 debt collection agencies, and we're in the process of developing new terms in respect of how they operate, because certain negatives have developed in terms of how they operate. People pay and we don't get our share of it, or we feel that we don't get our share of it significantly. So we are now actually having new arrangements with them with a view to more streamlining this area. Yeah, so we would then have projections after that has been done.
And what about, as I said, 2015, 2016, what would have been the collections that you got from those 2 debt collectors?
I don't have that with me right now. I probably can research and send it for you, what we have got.
Mr. Chairman, is based on what you have just said, sir, would you want to elaborate and let this committee know what your findings have been thus far that would have caused you to look or to review the terms and conditions that you apply when engaging these debt collecting agencies? Are you indicating to us that something appears to be amiss, given when you inquire as to the arrears that you ought to collect and the actual amount that you have collected? And does that indicate to you that there's some discrepancy involving those debt collecting agencies? What is happening? Could you enlighten us briefly?
Member Mark, I will put it down to a timing issue as opposed to anything being amiss, really, in terms of when funds are collected and when funds are remitted. I will put it down to that.
Can I just follow up on the debt collection and ask what cost is incurred by the debt collection agencies, perhaps as a total cost or as a percentage?
It is a percentage. It is 15% of all funds collected.
Thank you, Ms. Lyons. If I could go further and look at the whole issue of the mortgage payments with regards to HTC housing as opposed to, citizens taking a loan through a normal bank. And you talked about the issue of culturally people thinking that the houses are free. Is this something that you feel that needs to be addressed? And is it something that is dealt with when houses are allocated and mortgages are taken out? And do you feel that that is something that you need to address as an agency?
It is something that is addressed at the time of allocation of the houses, because I mean you come face to face with it when at the point of allocation. During your assessment, you are told, okay, this is the price of the unit, this is what the mortgage payment would be, and of course you'll have to qualify for it and so on. All right, so it is very clear, and I think some folks might be a little astonished at times. I would agree that some measure of public education is required to treat with some of it, yes.
Is there, for example, debt counseling, for example, that takes place prior to persons embarking on this kind of debts?
Right. So we don't have a formal debt counseling program, but during the assessment process, a lot of information is sought and a lot of information is shared with the prospective homeowner, and that gives them sufficient information to make some decisions.
Do you feel that in view of the large number of persons who don't pay their mortgages, do you think that that's something that you might want to look at? Do you think it would be useful?
Certainly.
Member Coffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lyons, as the MP for the largest housing development in the country, a lot of people come to me with HGC issues, and one of them is the fact that I'm treating here with your inventory. There are several houses which were allocated and where people abandon them for one reason or the other. And they have not been paid for, so that the mail keeps coming from AGC. And sometimes people attempt to go into the houses and try to assume the mortgage or whatever arrangement there is. And I'm trying to understand, these are AGC assets, part of your stock, your inventory. What measures are being put in place to realize these assets? Because some of the houses have been abandoned for 10, 20 years, and there is no attempt by the AGC to make good on it. And there are residents who are always willing to move in, to assume, or now, does it form part of your database? What is the policy or the arrangement for treating with these large body of abandoned houses?
Okay, Member Mark, there are several reasons why we have houses that appear abandoned or are in fact abandoned.
No, but the ones I'm asking about are the ones where there were tenants, right, and the tenants left, they migrated, or for whatever reason, or died.
Right, so I'm getting to that. You have quite a number of those units where two things happen. There are folks who have abandoned the houses and they're still paying for them. There are folks who have abandoned the houses and our record shows a live account still. What we have done recently, and recently as this week, we've completed an exercise and we've identified just over 1,000 of those units that you speak of. I would say approximately half of those are occupied by folks who would be a combination of illegal occupants and second, third, and fourth generation family members. The other 500 or so, the other half, are units that are just simply abandoned, but there's a live account. It shows an account in arrears. So for instance, when I spoke about letters going out when Member Mark asked, so those letters actually would have been going out, folks would have been invited to come in and so on. And it is because of their non-appearance that we would have done this exercise and discover now. We have, I would say, approximately 500 or so of those that are abandoned, that we are now formulating a program in terms of, one, to secure the assets to start with, and two, recovery. Now, recovery is not simply just going and take the house, because you remember, it is in the name of an individual, and it may have been done via a mortgage and so on. So there's a process to go through. So we are now formulating a program to treat with that, through legal and so on.
So as of last week, you have a total picture and you beginning to address it. Yes. Now, there was another issue that came to my attention recently, and it also deals with the housing stock. A gentleman came to me. He was never on your database, but he was presented keys and moved into a house and has been living there for some time. Now, this is one of the more recent developments, Greenvale. I'm trying to understand how, in terms of the maintenance of the housing stock and the agency being aware of all its assets, how could someone be given keys, move into a house, be living there, and with no arrangement with the agency? And I'm informed that there are several cases like that. How does that happen?
Well, Member Mark, I'll have to ask, can you say whether that individual received keys legitimately from the agency? Because if not, I would suggest that that was an illegal arrangement that somebody would have made. And not necessarily somebody at the agency, because we've had those cases. So, for instance, so it could be an unallocated house that somebody, one, either simply moved into, or two, somebody pretending to be a legitimate member of the agency family, saying that I can get you a house for whatever fee, and somebody paying some money and getting a key. That has happened, and we've dealt with cases like this.
I could give you more information. He said it was given to him in an MP's office. He collected the keys and moved in. But my query there is, I don't want you to go too far into that, is the fact that someone is living in a house, he has keys, and the house is completed, and there is no arrangement with the agency. I'm trying to determine, in terms of looking at your assets and being sure that, okay, we built 1,500 houses here, 90% is occupied, we know who's occupying them. How could people occupy a house without the agency being aware that someone has taken over its property?
Member Mark, you're correct. When we build, using your example, if we build 1,500 houses, we will know how many of those houses have been legitimately allocated and so on. Invariably, for one reason or the other, a few may not be allocated. And like I said, there could be several reasons. There are folks who will take advantage of what appears to be an abandoned or certainly unoccupied house and have moved in. And we have dealt with those. And we consistently deal with folks like that. We are in the news regularly. You see us conducting eviction exercises and so on. It is when we do our investigations and we've identified those folks, we take action.
Okay, there's one more question. I want to move on now to the incomplete houses. And people often come offering to finish them. I understand the perils of that. Do you have an idea of how many, in terms of those houses that have been abandoned, what percentage of them are available for allocation? And would you agree that the slowness in the allocation process contributes to the squatting problem, or the rush for houses that aren't really supposed to be distributed?
Member Coffey, my apologies. I think I referred to you as Member Mark earlier. Okay. Mr. Mark, my apologies. Member Coffey, the agency cannot, does not, and will not condone illegal activity. Whether it is an abandoned house, whether it is a house that's recently completed, somebody illegally entering and occupying the house is unacceptable, is illegal. So the agency will not condone that in any way. The allocation process, I respectfully submit, is not slow. It may be a little lengthy, simply because we try to be very thorough to ensure that, one, you meet the requirements. One, you're not the owner of property. Two, that your finances check out and so on. So it may take a little while. But But we are relatively assured that when we do that allocation, that you have met the proper requirements and so on, and that you can go in and live, hopefully, a very fruitful life.
I wanted to go further into that process because I think one of the issues, and I see here, I want to get the exact quote. Okay. You spoke about the communication process in terms of applicants being informed of the status of their applications. And it's one of the complaints you hear from the public. Nobody knows what the status is. And now I understand, given that you have, the last report I heard was 180,000 applicants, and you have, well, according to the statement today, you have about 1,500 houses, you know. And so it's a huge gap. But I think it could be helped if there is greater communication and, to another extent, greater transparency in the process. Does the agency have a way to, or plan to address this? Because a lot of the problems you have is simply based on the uncertainty of where people are in the process.
Member Coffey, I thank you for the opportunity to clarify something that I think is a misconception in the national domain. When folks apply for a house, they do not apply to the HDC for a house. Folks say, I applied for an HDC house. Well, you don't apply to the HDC. You apply to the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. The database is maintained and managed by the ministry. HDC does not maintain the database. What we do at the HDC, we do have access to the database. So for instance, if someone is inquiring about the status of the application, we have access, we can go on to say where you are in the process. But the HDC is not the owner of the database. So you don't apply to the HDC for a house. You apply to the ministry for a house. So we sound like semantics, but it is something that we need to clarify with the national public.
I thank you very much for that clarification, because it's the first time I'm hearing it. Everybody comes and says they applied for an AGC house, and I realize that the AGC and the Ministry of Housing are in the same building, and I don't know there's a Chinese wall between the AGC and the Ministry of Housing. So once you're there, you could be you could be any place. So following up on that, I want to get an idea of in terms of the ministry, Madam PS, I see here you're saying that there are plans in place to seek accommodation elsewhere. I don't know whether you've approached Presdy. I have no knowledge of that. But where are those plans in terms of getting accommodation for the Ministry of Housing with or without the HCC?
In terms of our plans for relocation, what is happening is that we had mentioned before that the ministry is restructuring. So right now, we kind of overflowing in where we are on one flow, right? So we're really overflowing there. And so when we look at our structure going forward, we would not be able to hold our project unit and so going forward. Even our procurement unit, we wouldn't be able to do that. The process, what we are doing now is really, because to go to Presdy, we have to go with like a structure, staffing and square footage and that kind of thing. So we have not done that as yet. We're in the process of doing that now to go forward to Presdy to ask them to help to relocate us. But that is just the ministry, not the HEC.
It sounds as if you are saying the ministry is homeless.
Not really, but not really, but once we get our additional staff, we probably might be homeless.
Thank you, Madam PS. If I can just come back to the issue of the abandoned housing stock, and if maybe through you, Madam PS, I could direct this to Mr. Lyons. Can you perhaps give us an idea of the total value of the abandoned housing stock?
I wouldn't want to offer a guess and probably provide an incorrect figure. I can get back to you on that.
Sure, but as a follow-up to that, I mean, this is a very important asset, as all the other assets of the HCC. Could you confirm that the HCC does not have a head of security in place, and is that something that you'd be concerned about?
Yes, we do have an acting manager of security at the moment.
And are you satisfied that that is sufficient?
Well, let me say
to secure your very many assets?
Yes, I'm satisfied that the arrangement we have in place, we do get the necessary information on what is transpiring, what is happening. We do have a program in place where we treat with abandoned and illegally occupied units. It is a process, but I'm satisfied that we have a sufficient program in place, yes.
So you're saying that you're satisfied with the security that you have available?
Okay, so if we are talking about our ability to secure every house, every vacant unit, the agency simply cannot afford that. We just simply cannot afford that. In terms of our ability to track the units that we have that are abandoned and or illegally occupied, I'm satisfied that we do have a program in place for that.
And just one follow-up question. I know we spoke about the vandalized houses being sold. Have any of these vandalized houses been sold?
Not just yet.
Can you perhaps give us an update as to why that has not been?
There's a process,
possible?
like I said. One was verification. Two, now that we have a real sense of exactly what they are, the proposed arrangement is that we will do two valuations. One to determine the value of the house as is, and one to determine from a quantity surveying point of view what the value is to bring the house back to some livable condition. The thinking is that the resulting sale price of the house will be less the value to restore the house to normalcy.
Thank you. I just want to recognize Member Webster Roy and then Member Olivierre for one question.
Thank you, Chair. I have a comment, Madam PS, and then I have a question. So my first comment is, I strongly believe that you need to engage in a public education exercise based on the fact that I didn't even know that you don't apply to HDC because that's what you always say, and that's what the public is thinking, that you apply to HDC for a house and the HDC isn't responding. So we really need to educate the public on the correct process, the procedure, so we understand we have all these queries out there in the public domain. My question is this to you, Mr. Lyons. After you attempt to recover debts through the agencies and people still don't pay up, what happens? What's the next step?
I just respond to that. We do have a public education campaign that is in the workings, just that we don't have money right now. So once we get funds, they will roll out the program. And it will tell you everything about the Ministry of Housing, its agencies, the processes, everything.
So it's planned for this fiscal?
Hopefully this fiscal.
Okay, great, lovely.
And to answer your question, member, we do take legal action next. We do go to court and get judgments.
And how successful has that been?
It has been successful. It's a slow process, if you will imagine the judicial system. But we have been successful.
Because I would suspect that the reason why you're not getting the collection because people are assuming that nothing would happen to them. So you could pay everything else, but not pay HDC or pay TTMF or whatever. I think that's it.
That is a perception out there.
Okay.
Member Olivierre?
Yes, if we may just go back to the issue where we were speaking about the incidence of persons obtaining keys and moving into houses without going through the proper allocation process. And the belief out there that oftentimes either persons who work with the HDC or represent themselves to be employees of the HDC would somehow manage to facilitate persons. Does the HDC or is your internal audit department involved in conducting investigations of this nature? Does your internal auditor look at examining internal fraud that can occur, and what role does internal audit play in reviewing these types of issues?
Yes, to answer specifically, yes, the internal audit the department has in the past investigated claims of fraud and allegations of fraud and so on. The process of allocation is so extremely rigid that you can't get a house unless you come to the HDC and pay at the HDC. If you in any way are able to get a house without having paid some deposit at the HDC's cashiers at the head office, you have committed some kind of crime. It is as simple as that. The process is extremely rigid.
Member Mark?
Yeah, I just wanted to find out, Mr. Lance, what is the outstanding number of applicants who have applied and are yet to receive a home from the HDC?
So Member Mark, like I said earlier, the database is owned by the ministry.
Yeah, the Ministry of Housing, yes, but I know you're borrowing it.
I borrowed
so I'm asking you.
The latest information I have is in excess of 180,000 applicants.
180,000, okay. Could you also indicate to us, like the Ministry of Housing, as you mentioned, when people apply, you know, everybody's anxious, believing that they would be next in line. But as my colleague said, there appears to be systems in place that you would have established to ensure that there is fairness in the distribution process. But there's a contamination of that process to the point that there appears to be widespread nepotism, favoritism, and people go out there and they actually give people false hopes by saying they can get a house for you, but you must give me $2,000 or $3,000 as a down payment. I wanted to ask whether you have come across this phenomena, and if you have, what kind of message or education you have for the public, and further, what steps have been taken by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and the HDC to stamp out or root out this kind of behavior and conduct that appears to be widespread in some respects within the Ministry of Housing and the HDC. Could you clear the air for me on that?
Mark, let me first remind us all that there is a cabinet-approved allocation policy. It's fairly well known, I think. I don't necessarily need to go through the entire thing. So that's the first thing. With respect to your comment about folks pretending to be somebody who can advance you through the system, that is unfortunately quite common. As recent as this week, I've had to report a matter of information that came to me. I've had to report to the fraud squad that they're investigating. That is quite common. The agency has in the past published advertisements advising members of the public that the only legitimate place to transact any business with respect to obtaining a house, particularly payment of any kind of money or funds, it is at the head office, at the HDC's cashiers. If you don't do it there, you are committing a crime, you are being fooled, you are being hoodwinked. It is wrong, it is illegal. The agency is also will embark upon a campaign soon that will continue that education program, saying to folks, listen, do not meet somebody on the street corner. Nobody can advance it like that. It doesn't work like that. If you don't pay at the HDC's head office, it is not legitimate.
Well,
and I take every opportunity to say that. So thanks for this opportunity to be able to say that.
Yeah. Also, what system do you have in place to regularly update customers, applicants who would have applied to the HGC through the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, that their application is either being considered or the application is not being considered, or whatever the reason. But, you know, the customer is very anxious to know what is happening to his or her application, particularly those who have applied 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, and even just under that. So do you have a system in place to keep the public aware of where their application is in terms of tracking, so that members would be given some degree of assurance or reassurance that the system has not resulted in the application being lost or misplaced, as the case may be? Well, I just wanted to get that clarified from you, Mr. Lance.
But Mark, there is not a routine program of update. However, the two avenues that are available, 3 avenues actually. Folks can go to the ministry, because like I said, the ministry is the owner of the database. Applicants come into the agency all the time. We have customer service reps available during working hours, Monday to Friday, who respond to applicants, telling them what the status of the application is. And folks can also access the database online through the ministry's website. When they applied, they would work on username and password and so on, so that they can go in and check to see what's happening.
And are you satisfied with the quality of interaction between the customer representatives and the public when they visit HDC or Ministry of Housing and HDC to inquire? Because we have, as parliamentarians, have been receiving some very negative responses in terms of how the customer is treated and related to via those applicants who come before the customer rep at the level of the Ministry of Housing. So first of all, you know, what has been the reports coming your way, and whether there are efforts to improve, if there are such deficiencies, the quality of interaction between the applicants, customers, and those representatives of the HGC or the Ministry of Housing.
Mark, let me say that there is always room for improvement. And any member of the public coming to inquire about their application, and they're told that you have not yet been selected, leave disappointed. So the feedback will always, not always, but is likely to be one that it was negative. But there's always room for improvement.
Madam Pierce, I'm just looking at the selection criteria and the random selection category. Now, there are a lot of applicants who would say they've applied 10 and 15 years and so on. Can you give us some indication of what those numbers could be, specifically over 10 years? Do we have any idea of what the numbers might be?
I don't have that number available here. The persons who would have applied for houses over 10 years, I don't have that.
The reason
figure
I'm
here.
asking that is because I see in your point system that you just have over 8 years, 5 points. Yes. But I was wondering whether, in fact, that over 8 years needs to be broken down further. For example, someone who may have applied 15 years ago would be disadvantaged as opposed to someone who has applied 8 years ago, and whether any consideration should or could be given to further breaking down that category and awarding more points to those who have been waiting the longest. Would you care to comment on that, Madam PS?
Well, this is a cabinet decision, so if we have to do it like this, then we'll probably have to go back to cabinet. But is something that we could consider?
I'm just thinking, what are your own views on that? Do you think it's something that would increase the perception of fairness in the allocation of houses? And is that something you would want to recommend?
Yes, we will look at it, yes, going forward.
Member Olivierre?
Yes.
Thank you.
If I may just ask, could you indicate what is the size of the database at present? How many applicants are on the database?
I think it is over 180,000.
Okay, now when last would you have conducted an exercise then to ascertain how many of those persons are still interested? Because, well, as you indicated, in terms of eligibility for access to a home, you must not have property on your name. So there may be a significant number of persons whose status would have changed over the years that are now ineligible. So does the Ministry of Housing have a particular database update period where you would actually ask applicants to make contact with you to to ascertain their validity to still remain on the database, because then the numbers might reduce to something that's more manageable?
Yes, thanks for that, because one of the things that we have been saying that all along in terms of the amount of persons that we have, and the ministry has not done an update on the database, but that is something that we will be considering, because it will give us a better picture of the persons that we have who are still interested, right? So.
Thank you, Madam Pierce. One question from Member Coffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Pierce, now I've heard several times among the questions here the recognition of a need for a public education program to inform the population of the procedures, the processes, because if you have 180,000 people on the list and you have less than 1,000 houses to distribute, that creates a kind of panic. But then you also said that you don't have the funds to do the public education campaign. And I'm trying to work out why, where this stands on the totem pole of your expenditure. Because housing is important, and every member of parliament can tell you the great demand, and really you have people with unrealistic expectations, and there's nobody educating them on the process of being allocated an HTC home. And in fact, some of the problems you have with people thinking that they don't need to pay and they're given a home arise from that lack of information on the HTC process. So I think there should be some room set aside in your budget so that public education becomes an important part of dealing with your stakeholders.
We have identified funds that we could use under one of the IDB programs, where we have a component is called institutional strengthening, and that is one of the areas we're looking for to go forward with the public education campaign and also the strategic plan. Right? So we are working on getting the funds. It has already been approved, it's just to get the funds to do it.
Thank you, Madam Pierce. If we could just move on, and I would want to direct your attention to goods and services and to invite Member Mark to lead that discussion.
Thank you. Madam Permanent Secretary, in a period of economic contraction and falling output, inevitably there will be a rise in unemployment and even underemployment. And therefore, there is an imperative for us to place and to pay more attention to the principles of transparency, accountability, openness, which obviously will result in good governance. I realize that looking at this particular item, 22, short-term employment, that permanent secretaries seem to have large, or put it another way, they seem to have a great degree of influence and discretion, I should say, in the engagement of personnel who might be on short-term contracts, let's say for 6 months and under. What I wanted to ask is whether in this economic climate and period, you wouldn't agree that there is need for some degree of set criteria which would be open to the public for consumption, particularly when you have little young people leaving university with degrees and can't get employment. Would you not agree with me that the discretion that is available to the PS should be exercised in such a way that there should be an advertisement of these short-term contracts? Because from what I'm reading here, this is left completely and entirely up to the permanent secretary and whoever she or he chooses to be part of whatever arrangement to recommend, X person be employed or Y person be employed. Do you believe that at this stage in our economic development that there's need for greater transparency and accountability and a set of criteria established which would be advertised and the citizenry can apply to the respective ministries and on that basis you can proceed to select persons on a short-term basis? I'm just asking because given what I've read here, I don't think that obtains, but maybe you can explain to the committee what is the process and what you would recommend to improve that process in terms of transparency and openness.
It depends. Now, what we have here for the short-term persons, most of those persons would have been on long-term contracts at some point in time. And earlier, I had indicated that the process to retain positions in the ministries is a long and tedious one, that you have to go to the PMCD and in the cabinet, and it just takes long. So in the meantime, what happens is that the persons who would have been on those long-term contracts, because it would have been set positions, those persons are the persons that we would retain on the short-term contracts. Now, if you open it up, right, for, say, outside, by time, the recruitment process is a long process too, because by the time you advertise, you interview, you shortlist, you interview, by that time you know what happens, right? The 6 months probably would be gone because the process just takes so long. And just thinking about the amount of persons who would be applying, as you said, the unemployment rate, the amount of persons who would have been applying there. So these persons here would have been persons who have been employed, perform satisfactorily in the position, and we would have recommended them as a way of it's also, I mean, you know how the person would have worked. If you decide to go out, as I say, it's a cost to advertise and then to recruit and do all that. It is a cost. So as I said, you could look at it, as I say, it depends.
But what about persons how do people get into the system so that the database that you have, apart from those who might be performing the particular task or job, citizens who would like to submit their application to the HGC or the Ministry of Housing, what is the process? How is it done so that you have, as I said, a database that is available to persons who are desirous of becoming employed, either in the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development or the HGC or even both. What is the process involved here for citizens?
Okay, for the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, most of these persons would be on contract because public officers come in, they go through the Service Commissions Department. So these persons will be contract employment. What we do when we advertise, we create a database. After we shortlist, we create a database. So if we say we advertise for a position of, say, business operations assistant, and we had one position there. After you did the interviews, then you would have those persons on your database. So you would have probably employed one person, but you would have persons who would have met the criteria and who would be on your database. So if, for example, you have, because remember we're talking about short-term. Short-term is supposed to be like 6 months. So you have a project that you have to do, and the PS wants somebody who is a business operations assistant to do some project. Then we go on the database and pull the person from there. If the person is not employed, then we just offer them the employment going forward, 6 months, and then we go from there.
So what would be the total employment at the level of the HDC and the Ministry of Housing? First of all, as it relates to the public service segment, and secondly, the contract service level. Would you have that information available to you that you can share with us?
I wouldn't have the information for HEC.
Well,
So
Mr.
I
Brent,
think
Mr. Lyons should have it, but you could have, for instance,
Right,
for
the
the
information
Ministry of
for-
Housing,
in
in
terms
terms
of-
of the total employment at the level of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, in terms of public service jobs,
Yes.
and the number of contract employees.
Okay.
Both short-term,
Short and long-term.
fixed term, 3 years and under. You have that available, or you could give
I
us a
just wa-
summary and then give us in writing.
Yes, I'll give you it in writing to be clear, to be sure of whatever it is. The public service is probably have about 200, between 200 persons in total. But in terms of the breakdown, I would have to give you that.
And
in
Mr.
writing.
Lyons, how would you help us here?
Yes, Member Mark. The HGC has 1,020 employees. It's broken down into 3 categories. We have 3 categories of employees. We have monthly paid employees covered by a collective agreement with the PSA. It's 103. We have daily rated employees, again by a collective agreement with the NUGFW, 673. And we have contract employees, 244, a total of 1,020 employees.
Okay. Now, I just wanted to ask the Permanent Secretary, and this is in the interest of transparency and openness and accountability. When senior officers are being employed in the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, do you have a role? What role would you have in that exercise when senior people? All right, I want to also join the chairman in congratulating the new managing director and the gentleman in charge of finance in the AGC. But what I wanted to clarify for transparency purposes, when it comes to the employment of personnel at the highest level of these organizations or agencies, what is the role, if any, of the Ministry of Housing? Or you have any role at all in that, or that is something completely left to the HDC in terms of employment?
The HEC is governed by a board, so they are responsible for that aspect in terms of hiring. The ministry doesn't have anything to do with respect to the hiring of officers for the HEC.
Oh, so Mr. Lyons and whoever is employed there, they would have been recruited by the...
Through the board.
Through the board. So if you want to get questions clarified, how do we get that? Do we have to bring the board here?
Questions concerning?
Well, in other words, like, what the public, when people are being recruited for engagement, how is it done? Is it advertised?
Yes, they go through the process, they advertise, they have a selection process, interviews and everything, but at the end of it all, the ministry or the permanent secretary does not sign off on that. That is signed off by the board. But they go through the process. The position is advertised, they get their applications, they have a HR unit, will do everything. Select, shortlist.
And if the public is interested in knowing how the process was conducted, you would be willing to provide us in writing with the whole process?
Yes.
For all the senior positions here?
All the senior
whether it's the managing director, the person in charge of finance, can we get like a breakdown in terms of information on this?
All the senior positions,
you may not be aware of the information now.
Yes.
Because as you said, you don't play a big role in that.
Yeah, but under the freedom of information, I said based on what information is available.
Yes.
Yeah, we could give based on, subject to that.
No, not freedom of information. This is a committee of the parliament, and taxpayers' monies are involved.
Okay.
So whether it is John Harry, in this instance is the managing director, I congratulate him, the gentleman in charge of finance, but they are paid by taxpayers of this country. And therefore, what I am asking is what is the criteria established for this exercise? Who would be entitled to apply? How was these people selected? What criteria would have been used? And at the end of the day, we know, well, look, this person was selected or that person was selected. We want that in writing. Could you supply that for us?
The whole process.
Yes, the whole process. So we could be enlightened as members of this committee.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Member Coffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam PS, I'm interested in the report on the agency's accounts, and I understand it goes way back, but how close are you to finalizing these accounts, which have been unaudited since 2004, I believe? And how can you function really without audited accounts for such a long time?
Yeah.
Member Coffey, thank you. The agency has recently completed, and this is not only at the request to have all accounts management and audited accounts brought current as at March 31st this year for 2016. The agency has completed its management accounts, and they are now ready. In terms of audited accounts, the agency has 2005, 2006 audited accounts, and we are in the process of having the others audited. We anticipate that it will take us a while again to have all audited, but we are in the process. If you are, with respect to the reason why that has happened, the agency, since its inception, has had some difficulty with respect to the quality of the financial records. And what the agency has been doing for the last 3 years or so, 3 to 4 years, was basically rebuilding those records and ensuring that they are accurate and we have the right information. So that has taken some time, and we are now at the stage where we now have management accounts up to 2016, and the audit process is continuing.
May I ask, who is your auditors, your external auditors?
KPMG, Member Mark.
KPMG. And as Member Coffey asked, when you suspect, I want to congratulate you again, when do you expect these financial audited accounts to reach the Parliament? Because, you know, it is really a serious indictment, not against you, because you have just arrived. But I would say that the management of HDC owes an explanation to the country as to why from the period 2004 to 5, and every year, as you know, Mr. Lyons and Permanent Secretary, the Parliament has been consistently allocating hundreds of millions of dollars, not to mention what the HEC has been able to borrow on the market to build homes, and yet still there is a complete absence of accountability in the context of the submission of annual audited accounts, balance sheet, and other financial statements. This is highly irresponsible on the part of an agency as important as the HDC and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. So we would like an undertaking from Mr. Lyons and your good self, Madam Permanent Secretary, as to when those accounts for the period 2004, 2005 to 2016 would reach the Parliament so that we can do our own inquiry and examination into those accounts.
Okay, Member Mark, let me first thank you for congratulating me. There has been a concerted effort to get to the stage of where we are now, to have management accounts by up to 2016. The audited accounts, like I said, will take some time again. I would probably defer to Mr. Polliner with respect to when we are able to bring it to the Parliament, but certainly management accounts are available.
Yeah, Member Mark, we would have to get the approval of the Auditor General. It's just in February, gone, 2 months ago, that I got from the Auditor General the 2004 audited accounts. So therefore, we have these accounts to audit, but we have the approval, I think, up to 2009. But we don't have approval to engage a KPMG from 2009 onward to 2016. Because we have to get the approval to have an external auditor as opposed to the Auditor General.
So the Auditor General indicate, because I think under your act,
yes,
the Auditor General is the agent.
That's right.
For,
yes,
examining your statements
that's right,
of accounts.
Yes.
And therefore, if you need an external auditor, you need her permission
yes,
or his permission.
That's right.
Are you saying to us that you have made that effort and you're waiting a response from the Auditor General to engage an external auditor so you can speed up this exercise?
Not at this stage. We do have intentions of approaching the Auditor General to get approval from 2010 to 2016. We only have up to 2009. The current KPMG is currently auditing 2007. They have people there on site currently auditing 2007. But we have up to 2009 approval. And so therefore, it's a bit challenging to give you an overall time frame. But the accounts have been prepared for audit.
How can we help you? Because we are responsible to the citizenry of Trinidad and Tobago, and we are not only lawmakers, but we supply finance through the budget to provide goods and services for TNT. So the same way how we approve a budget as a parliament, we are accountable for every cent at the end of the day, meaning we want all those agencies that have been allocated monies to spend those monies in accordance with the approval of Parliament. That is our responsibility, to ensure there is no deviation. And therefore, what I am asking is that, seeing that the accounts are outstanding for so many years, what can you recommend to us to assist you to speed up those accounts so that they can arrive on the desks of the Parliament? We would like to help you, and that's why I'm asking you, how can we assist?
But I think we will have to approach the Auditor General with a view to getting not just KPMG, one or two other firms involved in the audit. Because that is where we are right now, and we can't go to the slowness or the pace of KPMG to get these things done. But the figures are there, prepared up to 2016. So I think how you can help me is probably sensitizing the Auditor General that we may have to use more than one external auditor to get this thing done.
Well, could you submit that in writing?
Certainly.
And may I also ask Mr. Chairman whether Mr. Lyons Yes, sorry. Yes, I was making the point whether Mr. Lyons could provide us with any information as it concerns the 2004 accounts, the accounts of 2004, whether you're aware that those accounts were qualified by the auditor, and if you are aware, could you share with us the findings, some of the findings, and if you can't do it, you could advise us why you can't, whether you are aware of these things.
I am aware that it's qualified. With respect to specific findings, I can provide that to you.
Yeah. Is it possible that you can do that? You may not be able to give us everything, but is it possible that you can give us a tight summary of what you consider to be some of the key findings of the qualified audit of 2004?
Sure. I'll ask Mr. Pauliner to fill in.
Yeah, through the chair, remember, there were delayed bank reconciliations were one. As you know, that has significant reputational risk because not clearing bank reconciliations on a timely basis is a problem. Inventory management was another one. Fixed asset register issues were another one. Payables, some people were paid twice. There was another one that was noted in the management letter of 2004. Those about, it's around those kind of issues that we're talking about. Delayed bank recs, payables being twice, inventory, fixed assets. Those are the general gist of it.
Do you have a fraud policy, anti-fraud policy?
Yes.
And would you share with us whether, from your examination of those accounts, there were any signs of fraud being committed against the HTC and by extension the people of Trinidad and Tobago that warranted our concern?
Well, the nature of the qualification was a disclaimer, right? The auditor disclaimed an opinion, which is the worst type of qualification you can have because of that very nature of things. But we didn't really, there wasn't any issue from what we saw of fraud, but then you can never deal with it in that way. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir.
Through you, Madam PS, to Mr. Lyons. I note the allocation of 354,341,372 to the HTC, which represents a decrease of about 69 million thereabouts. Can you indicate to us how this is going to affect your delivery in 2017?
I'll take that, Mr. Chair. We had responded that we would maintain the expenditure. How we would do that is we would look at the proceeds from our Victoria Keys project, which is estimated at around 400 million odd. And we would also, so therefore we were short of 571 million. And we would make that a pretty shortfall at Victoria Keys and the conversions that we normally do in terms of LTOs to mortgages.
And we are halfway into the financial year. Can you indicate how much of that projected amount has been realized or is expected to be realized?
Well, we've just started on Victoria Keys, or the inflows. It has now started to come in terms of from March, right? But we still depend on the Ministry of Housing for our debt financing. They tend to pay our bond interest and our bond financing and our loan arrangements. So some of it is still up in the air in terms of where we go.
And the income from Victoria Keys would be by way of sale of units, is that?
Yes.
Can you indicate how many units have been sold?
Within 5 weeks, there are 30 units to the tune of $63 million.
I also note that, that the HCC administrative cost is not covered by the allocation. Can you indicate where that cost comes from? Where is it budgeted?
Well, again, that is what we wanted. We wanted to make it up with the sales from Victoria Keys and the conversions. The cost is definitely not covered by the allocation. And the conversions to them by way of mortgages.
Thank you. If I could just move on and direct our attention to the development program and the consolidated fund, and to note that with regards to the board of the Sugar Industry Labor Welfare Committee, which demitted office on September 12, 2015, and that a new board is yet to be installed. Madam PS, can you shed some light as to why almost 2 years later that has not taken place?
I am aware that the information has been submitted to the Ministry of Finance. There's a boards committee, and we are still awaiting information on that.
A representative from the Sugar Welfare.
Yes.
Here. Can I through you, Madam PS?
Yes.
As to how the absence of a board would have affected, perhaps first of all to explain to the public what projects are involved and to what extent these projects would have been affected.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the Act specifically states that only the board can do works in our housing developments. And we have about between 21 and 24 housing developments. So we can't do any infrastructural works, we can't do any drains, we can't fix any roads, etc. Apart from that, there are legal matters that we have to attend to. For example, because Sugar Welfare was initially set up as a mortgage company to offer mortgages to cane farmers and sugar workers. We currently have about 764 mortgages, because we stopped giving mortgages in 2007, but we have about 764 existing mortgages that we are collecting installments on. When the borrowers have finished with their mortgages and they want their deeds, etc., we have a backlog awaiting the new board, because we can't do any conveyancing because the board has to sign off on these matters. So what we have been doing in the absence of the board is light works within the development, because we have empty lots that we can't give out to anybody, but we have to secure them and ensure that they are kept clean in keeping with the public health ordinances of the various regional corporations where we have these housing estates. But the lack of a board have compromised our work a great deal.
Member Mark.
Now, I am alarmed. I am shocked that 2 years almost we have not a board appointed. You know, on another occasion, I cannot ask the permanent secretary, nor your good self, for that answer. Maybe this committee will decide on another occasion to summon the Minister of Housing and Urban Development to explain to this committee why a board has not been appointed after 2 or close to 2 years. And what is even more alarming is this. You have indicated to us that only the board can give approval for infrastructural works and projects. And to date, no drainage work has been done, no infrastructural works has been done. More seriously, 764 mortgages. And people have completed payments and they are waiting for their deed of release and they can't get it, based on what you have said. Is that a fact?
Mr. Chairman, just a bit of correction. We have about 764 existing mortgages. All have not been paid off.
Could you tell us how many have been paid off and we're awaiting deeds of release?
We have about 75 persons who are currently awaiting releases from there. So what they have been doing, they have paid their releases, but we cannot convey.
Now, this is the point I'm making, and I understand your predicament. You are not to be blamed at all for this terrible situation. We will take it up with the necessary persons who are responsible for this. What I would like to suggest is this. Have you been able to make an assessment of the deterioration of the quality of the infrastructure, given the lack of maintenance, given the inability to do infrastructural projects and drainage? What is happening to those units, the 764 units or less than 764 that you would have normally serviced? What is happening there? Could you give us a status report?
In the housing estates, fortunately, the regional corporations in which the housing estates exist do assist us by doing infrastructural works in those housing estates. Because sometimes sugar welfare doesn't have the financial wherewithal to do the volume of work that is needed. The regional corporations would pick up some of the slack. So while we may not be able to do any work, it is not to say that work is not being done at all. The regional corporation have been assisting greatly in ensuring that the standard of living of the residents in our housing estate does not fall below the standard within those regional corporations.
Okay.
Thank you. Madam Pierce, would you agree that in the absence of a board, it would be the responsibility of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development to perhaps oversee what is taking place at the SILWC? And if you do agree, can you in that light tell us perhaps when last a site visit by the ministry would have been done to any of the housing projects of the Sugar Welfare Board? And if so, what were the findings?
The ministry has not done any site visits within recent times, so I can't say what is the status of the units, the developments.
But Madam Pierce, would you agree that it would be incumbent upon the ministry to perhaps do a site visit or to so order a site visit in the absence of the board?
Yes.
And could you give the committee an undertaking that such will be done in the very near future, pending the appointment of the board?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Coffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Brown, could you tell us what were the significant projects that were being embarked on by the board over the last 5 years, and where were these projects?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I assumed duty in sugar welfare in October of 2016. What I do know is that the last set of projects that were being done at Brothers Ghat, which is a relatively new housing development, Taruba, and we also have one at Orangefield. Brothers Guard would have been a sewer system that we initiating a sewer system in Brothers Guard. That is still an ongoing project. We have in Taruba, we were doing squatter regularization in Taruba.
Where is Brothers Garth?
Brothers Guard is in Princestown. We were doing squatter regularization in Taruba, which is in San Fernando, just opposite UTT. And we are upgrading of Silwick housing development. That is the general upgrading of all the housing developments under Silwick. In Orangefield, which is a new development, we were also developing the lots to hand out to the persons who were given visa plans under the Caroni Limited. When the Caroni lands were exhausted, they approached Sugar Welfare, and we gave out lands to the former Caroni workers also. So those were the projects that I know we were working on for over the past 5 years.
Thank you. Member Mark.
Madam, through the chair, could you tell us whether these houses under the 24 development projects that you outlined, that is under the SILWC, are these houses allocated solely for past employees of the sugar industry, or is it open to the public?
No, it's not open to the public. According to the Act, the houses were for sugar cane workers and cane farmers only. So members of the public can't access them unless the Act is changed.
And could you tell us what is the relationship between the sugar industry, labor and welfare body and agencies of government such as TNTEC, WASA, and the Environmental Management Authority in terms of making sure that whatever objectives or goals that you have set yourselves would be achieved?
Well, we have to approach all the regulatory agencies, especially when we are developing lands. For example, in Orangefield, which is a new development, we had to partner with WASA, with TNTEC, and also the EMA in order to get that project off the ground. And they have been working closely with us because the project is still an ongoing project. It has not been completed as yet. And they have been working closely with us to ensure that we stay within the guidelines that they have given us.
Could you give us an appreciation of the infrastructural works that have been detained as a result of the absence of the appointment of a board, apart from the lack of construction of drainage, as an example? What other infrastructural works have been negatively affected by the absence of a board, from your perspective and what you know would normally have been in the pipeline had a board been in place?
Well, for example, if you take in the squatter regularization project in Taruba, everything is at a standstill because you must have board approval. When you regularize the squatters, the board have to sign off on who will get what lot, etc. The board have to sign off on what is the cost of the premium that the person will pay for that lot. The board also has to be involved if we have to get TNTEC approval, WASA approval to come and access electricity or to run water, etc. The administration cannot sign off on those things. The board has to sign off on it. So everything we do where land is concerned must have board approval. So everything is in abeyance at the moment until we get a board.
Could you also indicate to us what was the allocation in the 2015-2016 budget for this particular body, as well as what was in the budget for 2016-2017? I don't have that before me at the moment.
No, I can't give you the figure for 2015, 2016. I could provide it in writing, but for If you're talking about PSIP projects, we got $8 million in 2016, 2017.
What about recurrent budget, the
No,
recurrent?
I could give you that in writing. I can't tell you the recurrent budget right now.
But because of the absence of a board, if we do not get a board appointed by the end of this fiscal year, the PSIP allocation would be returned to the consolidated fund.
Yes.
And the same would have happened last year.
Yes.
Thank you.
Member Coffey.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Brown, I just want to get something clear. Caroni closed in 2003, and you're saying that we have a company still dedicated to building homes for Caroni workers in 2017?
Well, we are no longer building homes, but we have existing mortgages on our books that we have to manage. Apart from that, we also process the home improvement grants and subsidies on behalf of the Ministry of Housing.
Okay.
So that's what we engage in, and we also do title searches for the land settlements agencies.
No, but you mentioned drainage works and construction. What are those for?
No, for the housing estates that we have, we are responsible for all the infrastructure because they belong to sugar welfare. So if the roads need to be fixed, if the drains need to be fixed, anything, if a retaining wall need to be built, sugar welfare is responsible for building.
And those have not been handed over to the regional corporation?
No. When I checked, because I have had discussions with the Couva-Tabaquital Power Regional Corporation to start the process of handing over Dow Village, which is one of our housing estates. And it is an extremely long and complicated process. We have had site visits already to see what works we need to do before we hand over the thing. But when I investigated, the last housing estate that Sugar Welfare handed over would have been in the 70s.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam PS, if I could direct your attention to the IDF fund of 170 million that was allocated, but in particular to look at the accelerated housing program, which I believe 160 million would have been allocated. Can you give us some insight as to what this program is designed to achieve?
I would let Mr. Lyons give you details of what is happening there.
I thought you were ready to take it. Chairman, the HGC, as you know, is mandated to deliver low and middle income housing, and the board has set some very specific targets and so on. So, for instance, last year the target was 2,000 housing starts. This year, 2,500 housing starts. I am pleased to report that we are on target, and the accelerated housing program really it is to be able to deliver housing programs.
So you're saying that you're on target for 2,500 housing starts this year?
Yes.
Can you indicate how much of this allocation has been utilized in achieving those?
Yes, approximately.
Well, first of all, how many you've actually achieved so far to date?
Right. So in terms of the allocation, we've utilized approximately 126 million out of the 160. And with respect to starts, what you have? No, but in terms of stats, actual stats. Okay, over 250 starts.
Surely that is way below your expected target. If you're saying that you are looking at 2,500 housing starts.
Yes.
And perhaps you may want to define what you mean by housing start.
Good.
To start with.
Right, good. So these are actual contracts that have been awarded for the construction of housing units. and where some sod turning has taken place and construction activity have started. I mentioned earlier about our PPP program, which you will see that it will get going in earnest in the next couple of months or so. That will generate a significant number of the housing starts. We also have a number of projects in progress. You will also see several turn-in ceremonies in the coming months, which will add, and at the end of it all, we will have the 2,500.
Mr. Lyons, I'm trying to reconcile the expenditure of 126 million thereabouts, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
With how many housing starts did you say it was?
Just over 250.
Over 250. So would all of that expenditure be towards housing starts, or would they have been expenditure geared towards other aspects of the HCC housing stock?
Other aspects of the HCC construction program.
Can you give us some examples, perhaps, as to what this expenditure would have been on?
Sure. Let me ask Mr. Ramarak to fill us in on that.
All right. Good day again, everyone. So, for instance, we have 16 ongoing construction projects right now, right? And this isn't to do with the housing starts that Mr. Lyons was referring to just now. So the 16 construction housing, the 16 sites really have a total yield of 5,580 units. Out of that 5,600 units, approximately 2,900 were completed, 2,950 units, and there's a remaining 2,650 units to be completed. So a majority of that fund was actually used on this 2,650 units to be completed, and that is actually ongoing right now and is expected to be completed over the next 20 months.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Member Mark.
Yeah. I don't know if this should be directed at the Ministry of Housing or to the Managing Director of the HCC. Could you give us a status report on the 2 abandoned towers in Edinburgh 500, which I understand would have been built between 2008 and 2009 at a cost of close to $140 million. But my information is that there were a number of design defects in those structures, and those structures are just standing in the wilderness at this time as we speak. So I was wondering, HCC is interested in housing people. There are 2 structures that are standing there for almost 10 years. Is it the intention of the HCC to refurbish, redesign? And if you are going to do so, at what cost? Could you enlighten the public?
Yes. The HCC is actively pursuing all abandoned projects. The Edinburgh Towers, as you alluded to, is high on our agenda. We have reviewed new designs for it at what we will consider to be a reduced cost. To give you a sense, it will probably be in the vicinity of about $140 million to complete it, but we are actively pursuing that, as well as others. There's the View Fort project in St. James that is ongoing. We hope to complete that within 18 months or so, and several other projects like that we are actively pursuing.
How many apartments are there in those two towers, and what time frame you anticipate for, let's say, a reconstruction or redesign, I should say,
right,
and let's say completion of these towers? What time frame are you anticipating?
Okay. Let me ask Mr. Ramarak to provide those specific details.
Currently, there's 120 apartment units. A redesign of it would see that we could yield 138 units. and we need to do retrofitting works. So there's that design component. It will be done more than likely as a design build procurement route. So for design and construction, it is expected to take 18 months to completion. Yeah.
Member Coffey.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to request to you, Mr. Rama, could we get the 16 projects in writing and the status of them?
Of course.
Madam PS, just to, and as we close up, and I would invite members to think about any final questions they may have. But in terms of the development program, the consolidated fund, of that allocation of 86,100,000, if that is correct, can you indicate to this committee what percentage of the ministry's development programs have been implemented to date?
Hi, good day. Unfortunately, we don't have that information at hand, but it can be provided at a later date, soon.
Thank you. So can we take it that we'll get that information in writing?
Yes, you can.
And
Thank you.
just wanted to clarify something. You had asked about the site visits to Silwick. I've been advised that there were site visits to Silwick, but I'll have to give you the status reports on those things.
That would be much appreciated.
So we have been visiting.
That would be much appreciated. Thank you, Madam PS.
Through the chair to the permanent secretary, I see under 002, Social and Development Program, East Port Spain, there's an allocation for 2017 of $5 million, a variation of 4.3 over that of 2016. A board is in place, as I understand it now, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Right. Could you tell us first of all, what portion or percentage of this allocation has been drawn down as we speak, and what particular community services have been provided to the 78,000 people in that area as it relates to the drawdown thus far, and whether we can get an appreciation of what community services the company has in mind for fiscal year 2017. So I do not know if you or the gentleman from
the East Port of Spain, Mr. Lam, will give the information, the
Yes.
specifics on that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lam.
Pleasant good afternoon once again. As relation to the drawdown on the $5 million, no physical cash has been received. However, all of the approvals have been granted, and we are just awaiting the releases. As far as the areas of development are concerned, normally what we do, we have about 8 target areas that is like 8 programs that are continually run. However, we have individual projects that would fall under those programs. For example, we have the community impact centers, we have the business development district, which is an ongoing program, the program which we consider education to production, community festivals, urban agriculture, sports programs, and community development plans. Now, specifically under the community impact centers, okay? These are individual centers over time that we would have set up in different communities within the East Port of Spain area, where we would conduct homework classes, we would conduct different craft programs. It's almost like a community center, right? So these programs are currently ongoing. Then we have the business development district. Under the business development district, there is an area, for example, that we may consider the commercial stretch, okay? And this initiative is really where we highlight it as such. So the company signage, the road signage and all of that, it's about developing those particular components, okay? And out of the $5 million, we would have apportioned $1 million to deal with that. Education to production. Now, a serious challenge we have in East Port of Spain is where the majority of the contracts or the development programs that go on, we try to employ the contractors from within the community. But then we have the challenge where some of the contractors are untrained of the tendering process. Some of the people are not well educated about dealing with that type of business. So we have embarked on a training program where we would now educate the contractors. Contractor training programs, liaison with how to get your company VAT registered, and things like that. We also had a UBIS program, which we conducted in the last fiscal year under that same initiative. Then we can go on to the community festivals where we do little sports days, the different, like if we were to have Diwali, when we have Carnival, we deal with little projects and festivals as we go along. And the sports program, most highlighted there would be the boxing program that we have ongoing right now, which we also use some of the community centers as a training center for the boxing.
I want to really congratulate your good self and the company for such lofty and noble projects and ideas. But if we are to go by what happened in 2016, you know, where the Minister of Finance apparently only released money late in July, and by the time you try to draw down on that, we were at the end of the fiscal year. So you end up with being able to do little or nothing for the 78,000 people of the East Port of Spain area. I would only hope on behalf of this committee that you would get some early releases so you can pursue those noble goals, because unlike the Sugar Welfare Board that don't exist, you have a board, but your problem is no money. So let's hope that very shortly you will be able to have the releases and that the very good work that you are doing and the board of directors of that company would in fact be pursued. I close with that.
I too would want to commend you on the projects undertaken, Mr. Lam, but also to ask whether in this financial year, whether the release has been different or earlier. Could you shed some light on that?
Yes, I can. So far, yes, I would say that the release has been different. Now, I want to take the opportunity to go back a little bit into last year. And I think last year there was a little bit of a challenge on the procedure for how we draw down on the money. Because historically, we have, when you talk about projects, people concentrate on hard projects, building drains, infrastructure, concrete. These projects are soft projects, social projects. So when the emphasis was made on how do we spend recurrent funds, right? We spend recurrent funds to pay salaries and to pay bills, operational expenditures. IDF funding, we use that to, for want of a better expression, do concrete work, okay, hard projects. But based on the mandate of our organization, we have a social responsibility. So we have now soft projects, which doesn't fall under recurrent funding, and nor does it fall under IDF, right? And that's where the PSIP stepped in, and that really kicked in last year. And I guess in the last fiscal year, we had some teething problems with how are we going to go about accessing the funding, what type of information, what type of reporting structure we're going to have. But that seemed to have ironed itself out in this new financial year. So we are really looking forward to having the funds on time and moving forward.
Chairman, you also have IDB funding?
No, not IDB funding, no.
All right, so you, as you said, in terms of the hard and the soft projects. The hard projects, would that include a project we learned about some years ago where they were trying to move the residents from that area, that is Laventille and its surrounding areas, from using outdoor toiletries and getting into proper modern lavatories?
The latching eradication project.
Right.
Yes, that would be considered a hard project. That's an IDF falling under the development funding project.
How is that project proceeding? You could give us a status report on that?
That project, for the last 2 financial years, it has been excellent. All of the funding that we requested has been drawn down. All of the sites that we attended to have been completed 100%. We also have that in our 2016-2017 IDF funding to continue with the project. And we've gotten approval, contractors have been selected, so it's a matter of getting the funds and moving forward.
Thank you very much. And of course, those questions would have been directed with the understanding that some of these social projects will impact on crime prevention.
That's right, yes.
Not only in that area, but in other areas of the country.
Areas, yes.
Yeah. If there are no other questions from members of the committee, Madam PS, with your permission, I would want to invite Mr. Lyons, first of all, to make any statements or suggestions that he would have for this committee in terms of how we can assist the HDC going forward.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I want to thank the committee actually for having us here, giving us an opportunity to share with the committee insights into the running of the agency and what's transpired. I'm also thankful to be able to share with the national public information on the application, the applicant database and so on, and the fact that in the allocation process that you cannot, if by chance you are you're receiving a house without having passed through the doors of the HDC at the head office, and particularly paying some kind of deposit at the cashiers, that you are in fact doing something fraudulent. So I thank the committee for that opportunity. With respect to any improvements or so on, or suggestions that I have for the committee, I think the committee has been doing good work, and I ask the committee to continue and wish them all the best.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. Madam PS, can I invite you now to make any statements that you would consider useful, important in terms of how we go forward, helping the ministry?
Yes, I would also like to thank the committee. I mean, before I came, I did some research, and then I saw that the committee is the watchdog for the government funding. So I'm saying, I know they also said that they are there to assist us where there are shortcomings to help us to perform better. So I said, I'm going forward. I said, the committee I have been looking at it, and I've seen you have been doing a lot of good work. So I would like to thank you all again for the opportunity for being here. And I said, certainly your recommendations will be taken. And hopefully when we wouldn't have to come back again, because we would be doing something good. So thank you again.
Thank you, Madam PS. Before I close, I would just want to, I know you would have spoken for the other entities under your watch, but if there's anyone who would want to say anything in closing.
Cool.
And before I close, Member Mark wants to make a point.
I just wanted to say to the Permanent Secretary and to Mr. Lyons that the conversation is two-way.
Yes.
Two-way conversation. We have put forward some ideas for your consideration, and we would like both the Managing Director of AGC and your good self as the PS to submit to us in writing, to the Chairman or Secretary, any further suggestions and recommendations that you would like to advance with a view to helping us consolidate whatever reports we will be generating to be submitted to the Parliament, so that we can, at the end of the process, in a very tangible way, assist both the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, as well as the HDC with some very positive and concrete steps that they can take to improve their operations, to improve their efficiency levels, the effectiveness of your operation, and the overall economy of it as well. And that, in the final analysis, would contribute towards improving the quality of the delivery of goods and services to the population, and ultimately result in a higher quality of life and standard of living. So I would like you all, both of you, to submit in writing to the chairman whatever recommendations you all would like to submit, so it could help guide the committee in its final deliberations as it, produce its report for Parliament's consideration.
I would just like to ask the chair, though, before we started, I should have made this comment. When we had submitted our written responses in the first instance, we would have made some changes after because some of the questions. So I just want to know if you all want that amended version. Yes,
certainly
right,
that would
because
be
we
useful
would
to
have,
us.
right, okay. So we'll send it forward to you all and then do our
Thank you for
things.
that.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Lyons, other members of your team, on behalf of the committee, I would want to express our sincerest thanks for you appearing here today and to endorse the comments by Member Mark that you should feel free, and in fact, we would be very happy to receive your recommendations, any suggestions that you might have going forward, that you might think of after the close of this meeting. I would again want to congratulate Mr. Lyons. I know it's a very challenging position. Housing is a very important, social good in the society, and of course, both you, Madam Pierce, and Mr. Lyons would carry tremendous responsibility in trying to meet the unfilled needs of those seeking housing. So again, I would want to thank you and to wish you all a very safe journey home and to wish you a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Meeting is now adjourned.